Hello, my name's Al and today I'm going to show you how to service your brake calipers. If your brake calipers aren't working quite as well as they used to, if they're stiff, like the pivots are a bit seized, which can happen if there's you've done a winter's riding, all that salt on the roads has been blasted into the caliper, can cause things to seize. Or even if it's just working fine and you just want to give it a bit of love, then here we're going to walk through and show you what you need to do. You're going to need a few things to service your caliper. Nothing too exotic. LOCTITE 243, maintenance spray, small brush, paper towel or rags, Allen keys, 10mm ring spanner, a pick or a small screwdriver, some quality grease, a file. Firstly, we're going to remove the pads. So it's just a 4mm Allen key. This whole procedure is much easier when it's done off the bike. You'll have a concave washer there that sits on the convex pad holder. And all we're going to do with the pads, we've covered this before in a small video, so I won't bore you to death with it. But basically we're picking any debris that's got stuck in the pad, any little bits of aluminium, any grit, anything that could score your rims. And once we've done that and it's all nice and clean, then we're going to run the pad over a file. So this is just going to remove any glaze on the pad, freshen it up so it's got plenty of power when it goes back on the bike. With the pads out of the equation, we're just going to give it a good clean. So a bit of maintenance spray on there. And just brush off any dried on mud. Just make it a bit nicer to work on. And once it's clean, we can get on with taking it apart. The key to taking anything apart successfully is to lay everything out in order. It makes reassembly just so much easier. First of all, we're just going to whip the adjuster out. And this is just going to get a little clean. Use a little brush if there's any grime caught in the threads. I'm just going to add a little bit of grease. So that's free running when it goes back in. Then we can strip the rest of the caliper. So first of all, we're going to take this front arm off the caliper. So we're going to undo this 10mm nut here. It can be quite tight. Use a ring spanner, not the open end. You'll be less likely to slip. This is just a lock nut. So remove that. And then this pivot bolt is threaded into the arm at the back here. So this is a 3mm on this 5800 brake. Unscrew it all the way. And there we go. Back of the brake is sprung. So hold on to it tightly so it doesn't snap back. And we should have our pivot bolt. And then on the back of the arm, we have this neat little bearing, which is made up of a couple of bearing races and some tiny little bearings in a plastic holder. So that's the front arm removed. Now we can get on with taking the remaining two bits apart. So again, we've got a lock nut. The spring now isn't under any tension, so you don't have to worry about anything firing back and hitting you. undo the lock nut. And same as before, 3mm Allen key to undo the pivot bolt. Once that's been removed, you'll see another bearing. And the pivot bolt and the spring. And that's it in its basic component parts. Next, we'll clean everything really thoroughly before we reassemble it. When you clean your brake, pay particular attention to the bushes that sit within the brake arm. Those need to be nice and clean, free of any grit and grime, because that will just cause friction. And now it's a part, you'll be able to get to parts which you couldn't previously. So there's a recess at the back there where the spring was, which you can now clean much more thoroughly. When it comes to the bearings, I'd recommend not fully disassembling them. This race on the back should stay in place. It's going to be a nightmare otherwise. Hopefully it's not too dirty. Give it a clean, bit of degreaser if you need to, plenty of towel. It is plastic, so only use grease and cleaner that's going to be safe on plastic. So we've got some grease here. We're going to add a bit of that to the bearings, just to keep it all nice and smooth. Stop them from corroding. And that should feel nice when it goes back into the brake. Before we reassemble this, we're just going to prep the bolts. So to do that, we're going to need to put a little bit of grease on the shaft of the bolt. Make sure you've still got your washers on there. Don't get any on the threads, because we're going to put a little bit of LOCTITE 243 on those, and that's just going to help keep everything together, help prevent anything from rattling loose. Now we're ready to put it all back together. So we've got a bearing, drops into the recess here, our spring, our first arm goes into place. Our pivot bolt. With this, you'll see that the spring has a little arm at the end, and that's got a locating hook on the other side for it to engage with. This needs to be done up pretty tight. Make sure that that hook of the spring is located correctly, that you can snap it back into place afterwards, even when it's fully assembled, if you do need to. And then we're going to add our nut. Make sure there's still a bit of LOCTITE on there. If not, you can always add a tiny bit more. Nip that into place, and with the 3mm Allen key, holding the pivot bolt, do that up securely. That is that part of the brake reassembled. Before we do the last bit, which is a bit tricky, we're just going to grease this roller here, help cut down on any friction. And we're going to pop the bolt through the front arm and pop the bearing into position on the bolt. This bit can be a bit tricky because you've got to deal with the spring tension. We're just assembling the two parts of the brake. Tighten the pivot bolt. And that, by the lock nut, is the brake assembled. Just adding a little bit of Loctite to that because we seem to have lost most of it. And same as before, tightening the 10mm nut whilst we hold it in place with our 3mm. Once that's tight, just check that everything's moving as it should. And we're going to refit our pads. It's very important that you get these on the correct side. So this is a rear brake. So I want to make sure that the front of the pad sits towards the front of the bike. You can see that the front of the pad is enclosed, so when you brake, the wheel's travelling in this direction, it doesn't eject the brake pad. So it's really important that you get that correct. I'm going to nip those up for now just to hold them in place. We'll have to reset those once it's on the bike though. And we have created a handy video for that as well, so you might want to check that out. With the pads in, just going to pop the barrel adjuster. It's all nicely greased. Back into place. That's ready to go back on the bike. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers.